Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. And, every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies. Go check out our archives. We've got some great episodes with the founders of Netflix and Kinko's and YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects and referral partners. And my guest today is Bennie Fowler. He is founder and president of Infinite Potential Ltd. He's also an 8-year veteran in the National Football League. He began his career as an undrafted free agent signed by the Denver Broncos back in 2014. And he was a member of their 2016 Denver Broncos Super Bowl 50 championship team. He may be best remembered for having hauled in the final pass for Hall of Famer Peyton Manning. Bennie is a member of a number of different organizations. He's had experience working around high-performing teams and individuals and has been coaching a lot of executives as well, including over 200 different business owners and CEOs while in the NFL. And he's also the host of the Quiet Time podcast. Of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses get referrals, strategic partnerships, and clients with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. You can go to rise25media.com to learn all about it, or also email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Bennie, pleasure to have you here today. And I want to dive into your journey, but I want to start at a particular moment of crisis, which I personally can relate to, because we were chatting before and a little bit about some of the similarities between our backgrounds. And both of us professionally have experienced some amazing highs and some amazing lows. And, my story, I worked in the Clinton White House, kind of like you, at the pinnacle of my profession very early on, found myself, I was 23 years old. I think you were around 23 years old when you were in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And it kind of is hard to go on from that, right? You're like, wait, isn't it always like this, And, a couple years later, you find yourself leaving the Broncos and you go off to another NFL team and you get cut. And, I know what it's like to go from that and to leave and to just kind of this feeling of wow, how can I have this incredible high, to all of a sudden you're kind of back to the basics. So take me back to that moment in your journey and what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was super, super tough moment. But if I, take myself back to that journey, I'm getting ready to hit free agency. So I'm coming off my best season with the Denver Broncos, and free agency's coming. It's here. Talking to my agent, okay, it's time to get paid. For those who don't know what free agency is like out there, it's teams kind of bidding on you in terms of your skills and your talents. So the Chicago Bears came calling. I signed with the Chicago Bears. They gave me some good money up front. I've now put myself in a situation to where I've got some good money. I am now playing in the city that my mom is already living in. My girlfriend at the time, who is now my fiance, I asked her to move out there with me. Everything is going great. Everything seems to be going on the right track. We get to the end of training camp, and I didn't perform at my best during training camp. We get to the end of training camp, and I got a call from the general manager. And he said, we're going to release you. And at that moment, I was embarrassed, sad. What am I going to do? So the next 4 to 5 weeks, it's what if the NFL doesn't come calling back? So it's one of the toughest moments in my career, but that's where I got the idea to write my book, Silver Spoon, The Imperfect Guide to Success. And sometimes life puts us on the sideline to give us a different perspective. And the possibilities in my life were still unfolding at that moment. And you and I, before we, hopped on the call or on this podcast, we were talking about how there are just certain situations and how do you respond to them. And what I know now is that there isn't always that smooth path of, okay, I'm successful now and I'm going to continue to be successful and nothing's going to happen. Now I go into situations and I understand like there are positives in this situation. There are also some negatives in the situation. And now I just look at it from a balanced point of view. Even if there is a negative situation, there are just as many positives and vice versa. There's, so many positives, but I'm not looking at the negatives. That's where you fall into those depression and anxiety moments because you didn't take a time to actually balance out the perspective. You had like these false glasses on that, oh man, it's like hopping into a relationship and you see only the good things in this person instead of the other things.
Right.
And that's kind of how, that's what that Chicago moment taught me. So, everything happens for a reason.
What was it like for you? You're so structured, so regimented, your parents were a big influence on you. Your father was a COO, which I think is fascinating because the COO role is to implement process, to put process into your life. And you are very, organized in the way that you approach things, but to all of a sudden go from being within multiple organizations, whether it was undergraduate, the football teams there, Michigan State, to the Bronco organization, to the Bears organization. What was it like to all of a sudden, be thrust out? And you did get other shots with other teams. You end up going to other teams, but you're on your own. Do you hire a coach? Do you hire a trainer? Do you do it on your own? And how do you figure out that for the first time in your life?
Yeah, the first thing I did was I knew that I had to stay in shape. It wasn't like I had these thoughts in my head, like, okay, there possibly could be my career could possibly be over, but there's also some teams who are interested. I'm still young that were calling. So the first thing you do is, I hired a trainer. Like I have to stay in shape. I have to be in shape. And that's the most important thing. And, a couple of weeks later, I ended up getting called by the New England Patriots first. I'm only there for 1 week, but this is an opportunity for me to play with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and they signed me. I got released because they traded for another receiver the next week. I signed with the New York Giants. I played that Monday for the New York Giants. I played 65 plays, no mental errors because I was in shape, knew how to study. I knew how to prepare. So I stayed ready. So I think that's one of the most important things. But at that time, like the first couple of days, it was just such a shock to me that I didn't know, like, what should I do now? But like, hey, stay in shape, stay ready. And it's just like, if you lose your job in the real world, like the first thing you do, like if, something were to happen now, what I know now, if I was in the corporate world is LinkedIn. Okay. Where are the job openings? Where are the things that, where I can use my skill set and who I am? Just like, kind of how I'm transferring out of the NFL now and into the entrepreneurship world as I've, grown my business. The NFL, it's coming to an end. And I had a mentor tell me that a couple of years ago, like, hey, you're on your way out. I was like, what do you mean? You're on your way out of the NFL. And he wasn't, saying that in a mean way or like your career is about to be over right now, but like, you should pretty much start getting ready right now because you're hitting that age and you're hitting that year marker where you're kind of expendable. And, some of the greatest advice that I ever got because, it led me to my business. It led me to speaking on stage. It got me outside of my comfort zone and it helped me really grow. So,
yeah. How did you, I want to ask you about how you manage that to do the coaching and speaking and being a professional athlete at the same time. But before we do that, we're recording this in December of 2021. As you mentioned, your playing days are, probably coming to an end, but it's a very strange way of wrapping things up. It kind of feels a little anticlimactic, I imagine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it kind of like with a whimper, right? So how do you, come to terms with the reality of that? Or had you heard about it from other players, seen it from other players, and so you kind of felt mentally prepared for it?
I don't think people can ever really get mentally prepared for it if it happens like super fast. But, getting cut a couple years ago and, having that mentor, reach out to me and kind of say that's where all the mental stuff kind of came in where I had to handle it right then and there. Yeah. So that was like 3 years ago now. So what I'm facing now, or like transitioning now, isn't a big deal to me, because the writing was kind of on the wall and I paid attention to the writing. I think a lot of players, even executives in other companies, they don't pay attention to the writing on the wall in terms of their career or where things are going. And then they get blindsided. Mm-hmm. Like, it goes back to that thing in terms of you're looking at all the positives of being in the NFL and not all the negatives. You have to look at the negatives as well. Even though it's your dream job, you have to take that lens and look at it from, a 50,000 foot view. So that's kind of the way that I've approached it. And you give yourself, you find your identity, you find your values and who you are as a person. And if you're an athlete, you transfer those skills of what made you a great athlete into everyday life. And you can still, this game of life is the ultimate game, not just playing on Sundays. The game of life is played every single day. Are you winning or are you losing?
Yeah, that's great. Talk about your parents and the influence that they had on you. Your dad was an executive at Ford for many years and a COO. What kind of an impact did they have for you?
My parents were incredible. My parents were incredible in terms of the impact that they had on me, but the impact that they had on our entire family and the example that they set. My parents going to work, my dad being an executive, Jaguar and Land Rover for Ford Motor Company, who he was as the man of the house and who he was as the head of the household and the way he approached things. But then also my mom being the head of the household. My parents aren't together anymore, but my mom being the head of the household and really setting an example. And I'll never forget, when my brother and I decided that, hey, mom and dad, we want to be pro athletes. We want to be basketball players. That's when they started getting us up at 6 a.m., 6:30 to run stairs, to run the hills, to do the sprints. Not to make us pro athletes, but to understand what it takes to be a pro athlete and really land that foundation. And, I ask parents all the time, how are you showing up for your kids? Are you setting the example every day of who they need to be, of the daily habits, the daily disciplines? People want to change the world. All parents and, not all parents, but, people out there want to change the world, but they're not paying attention to what's going on at home. And that's where it starts.
Yeah. Talk a bit about why you wrote the book, Silver Spoon. And you really, talk about that you had a different type of upbringing than many other professional athletes.
Yeah. And that's why I called it Silver Spoon. I don't have the typical athlete story. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, but that doesn't guarantee me a chance at the NFL. I have the same chance that, people have in different situations. So I wanted to explain the principles of success. And they all look, I think there are core principles to success, but they all look different in people. And nobody has that prove it path. I love that sometimes you see these ads of how to make 6 figures in 30 days and follow my blueprint. And I have the ultimate success formula. That's why I call mine the imperfect guide to success. There are some principles in here. Follow them how they fit into your life, not how I did it, because I did it my way, and my way looks different than my brother's and then my dad's and my fiance and soon to be wife. We all have different paths. And I don't want to tell people like, oh, you have to do it like this. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen like that. So, everybody has to go through their trial and error and build their own kind of roadmap to success. But there are certain things like hard work, dedication, discipline, being accountable, surrounding yourself with the right people for the kids and the other people who want to aspire to be professional athletes. There's a chapter in there that you don't have to be an athlete to make $1 million. The most successful people that I know in terms of wealth are not athletes. So
I love that point about surrounding yourself with the right types of people. Talk a little bit about how you went about that when you were in high school, college, and that was your goal to be a professional athlete. Because, when I was in college, my best friend from high school actually was on the UCLA football team. And I spent a lot of time there hanging out with the different players, some of whom made it to the NFL, spent a bunch of years there. Others who were, not taking it seriously, partying on the weekends, stuff like that. What was your, how did you figure out who you wanted to spend your time with?
Well, I did have a good time on the weekends after games for sure. So,
Glad to hear.
But
well, it's kind of hard not to at Michigan State.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the way I kind of gravitated, I've always made friends in different ways. So if I think about the friends that I had and the people that I have the utmost respect for, people that are relationship driven, but also will challenge you. So relationally driven, but also, will speak up and challenge you as people. So the guys that I kind of sought out, I've always sought out the best player at my position or on my side of the ball, or just somebody who would challenge me to be the best version of myself. So when I was at Michigan State, it was a guy like, Blair White. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He went on to play with the Indianapolis Colts and with Peyton Manning as well. Then I think about, guys like BJ Cunningham, Mark Dell. But on the other side of the ball, Darqueze Dennard was one of my favorite people, one of my best friends, still one of my really good friends to this day. But he was somebody who challenged me in terms of being better, or I needed to be better. And it was like, I'm not going to pat you on the back for being mediocre. So I think I really appreciate those types of relationships. If I think about, what my brother means to me. And of course, we're brothers, and we see the world very similar, but my brother's not afraid to call me out. That's what I appreciate the most in terms of people I've sought out. Julius Thomas, when I first got to the NFL, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. Those are people who are relationally driven with me, but also challenge me to be the best version of myself. And that's the thing, if no one can hold you accountable, then you'll never grow. And everybody's always looking for the pat on the back to see. Even some of these CEOs that I've been around, might not necessarily worked with, but they're always right. If you're always right, then, there's no growth there.
I want to ask you about, while we're on the topic of the people that you've come across, you've played with, you've worked with, you worked with both Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. What was their particular leadership styles between the two of them? You mentioned your brother a couple of times. So those are two brothers who've been at the highest levels in the NFL. What were they both like individually? Both of the Manning brothers were incredible leaders. I think Eli was more of a lead by example, pull you by the side, just put his arm around you. Peyton was more of a direct, let you know, and also lead by example. Both of them were great storytellers. Both of them were super serious when it was time to be at practice or in a meeting. But, they were one of the guys, though, in terms of being at the locker room or being at the lunch table and just laughing. They didn't think they were better than anyone else. Didn't matter if, what your job role was, or, if they sat down to have lunch with you, they would enjoy in conversation with you and get to know you and know your family, and just the ultimate competitors, but, really good human beings. Yeah. Yeah. Any other, you mentioned Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, any other players or coaches that you would, that you learned a bit about leadership or mentorship from? Yeah, definitely. Drew Brees and Sean Payton last year, two of the best leaders, and, what they were able to accomplish, but their authenticity, their transparency, and the way they kind of do things. Leadership takes on so many different looks and styles. There's no one way to lead. And I think that's what I've learned the most in the NFL, is that there's so many different ways to lead, and so many different ways that you can actually get through to people. And we're all different. We all have different walks of life and different backgrounds. And if you want people to get to run through a wall for you or to do something for you, you have to get to know that person for that to happen. Yeah. It's funny. Probably the number one question I've gotten from people over the years is, what was Bill Clinton like in person? And I'm fortunate. I've been around at least 3 or 4 presidents in person. I met Barack Obama. I saw him before he was president and when he was president. And it's interesting, the different types and styles of charisma that people have, leadership charisma. It's crazy to see. I was able to meet Barack after we won the Super Bowl and go to the White House, and it was one of the most incredible experiences. But I would be curious to hear, just from you, what was that like in terms of being around people of that stature? Around the most powerful man in the world. Yeah. Well, it kind of can seem like that in the NFL sometimes, right? But Peyton Manning seemed like it for a little while. Yeah. Well, we'll keep the longer stories for your podcast. But yeah, just briefly, it's actually relevant to the discussion about ups and downs. Because the first time I met Barack Obama, he was Senator Barack Obama, and it was in 2007. He was running for president against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was like this. She was like a rocket ship. Everyone thought she was going to get the nomination. Everyone thought Barack Obama wasn't going to win, but he had this incredibly clear-eyed, steady determination. They call him no drama Obama. He was not dramatic about it. He was just certain. That's all, the only way I can describe it. And a room full of people around him, they were just like taken up by him, we're just like so impressed by him. That was the first time I met him. And then, it's very different when you meet someone when they're president. Later, you got especially in the East Room of the White House or in the South Lawn or something, you got all the trappings of the presidency. But yeah, I've also met presidential candidates who are running for the office and seen them behind closed doors, and they operate very differently. It's the same thing with business leaders. Yeah. And actually, one thing I'm really curious about, you've worked with hundreds of different business leaders while in the NFL. How does one go about doing that? Did you just get the word out? Did you say, hey guys, I'm open for coaching now? Usually the phone doesn't just start ringing, especially when people think like, well, he's a wide receiver in the NFL. I can't call him. So how did you get so many different clients while also holding down a day job?
Yeah, that was more in the off season. That wasn't during the season. So that was more in the off season where I was doing the coaching, but it was a lot of
in the off season.
Yeah. There was a lot of coaching engagements that I was able to go to, different entrepreneurs in the same coaching class. I mean, every coaching class that I would go to would have usually about 40 different people, and you're coaching them and you're meeting these different people. So that's kind of how it happened. It happened more in a networking atmosphere, and then it would lead to one-on-ones. It would lead to different group settings, but it was all in the off season. Last year was the first time I took 5 clients into a season. And it's easier to manage that because Tuesday is your off day. So it might look like I'm only doing one session a month, while I was playing, but now it's full time. So that's how I was able to juggle it. It was all off season work.
Got it. And then one of the things that I find is so hard when you've competed at a really high level is being willing to do the things that you did that got you to that high level again later, right? Yeah. Like they talk about Kobe Bryant, even after he won championships, he'd get up at 5 a.m. the next morning, 4:30 a.m. the next morning, and be out there by himself in the middle of a dark gym, but that's rare. It's rare that people do that, So it's hard to like decide, I'm going to go in a new career. I'm going to do coaching. I'm going to be in the business world, and get yourself up off the couch and go out to an event, and introduce yourself. And part of it's a mindset thing where it's kind of like, geez, like, shouldn't they be coming to me? So how do you battle that stuff?
Well, number one, when it comes to when you ask that type of question, I don't think anybody just deserves to like, oh yeah, they're just going to come to me, unless you are like the Peytons of the world. Your purpose is what gets you out of bed in the morning. Now, everybody talks about purpose, and you hear things about the why, and, it's kind of, everybody's kind of sick of hearing about that, but it really is about the purpose. But you don't have to have like this incredible purpose like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates, where they want a Microsoft computer on every home or on every desk in every home in America. What's your purpose every single day? And for me, like I have an everyday purpose, which is to tell a football story. That's just an everyday purpose. Like you have to get out of bed to do that. And then I have a higher purpose in terms of helping 1 million people live and lead into their full potential through conversation, through podcasts, through coaching, through speaking engagements, through team coaching. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what gets me to going in a different direction, to go out there and meet people and to get outside of my comfort zone. It's something bigger than me. And I didn't always have that. Like that has transformed over time. And I had a life-changing conversation, but this world is built off of relationships. No one is going to care in 10 years that I played in the NFL. No one's going to care in 20 years. No one's going to care in 50 years. It'll be a cool thing. It will get me in a lot of doors, but who I am after is going to keep me in those doors. And it goes for any other athlete. It goes for anybody. Like everybody's doing something great. Everybody has these unique skills and talents. So who you are as a person is actually more important. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to have that mindset. You have to be open-minded. You have to learn how to grow. You have to learn how to have tough conversations. You have to be in uncomfortable situations.
And then a related question. So you grew up around your dad, who was an executive in the Ford Motor Company. So maybe it just came natural to you to be around executives. But, was when you got started with coaching, did you have moments where you're like, God, what am I doing here? Like, why am I coaching this 50-year-old CEO? Like for me, like, it's like such a switch from like, Wednesday through Monday, it's all out, intense athleticism, professional athlete. And then Tuesday, it's talking with this CEO who's got a problem. They got to fire their HR director or something like that. Like, how did you find those commonalities in shared experiences and make it relatable for them?
It's literally the same thing. It's literally the same stress. What, they're kind of going through. The reason why I can relate to CEOs or entrepreneurs is because if you think about a football team, it's 53 entrepreneurs on one team coming together for one common goal on a Sunday. But you might not like this guy over here, or the quarterback might be mad at you, or the head coach has put you in the doghouse. How are you going to navigate these things so the team can win? Same thing that goes on in business. You have some C-suites that, I got to deal with this guy, or they don't want to go to work. They're kind of on a losing streak type of deal. But how do they bring their best selves to their team? How do they lead their team? How do they lead their direct reports? That's going to drive. At the end of the day, in your career, you're judged based off of performance. And, these CEOs that I'm talking to, these people that I'm working with, they understand their business. They understand what needs to get done. But sometimes you can't tell the forest from the trees. And just having a simple conversation of giving perspective and, seeing what the goal is, seeing what the reality is, what are the options, and then, making some commitment to like what you actually will do will help you grow.
I think that answered the previous question, which was how you got so many clients. That was a perfect answer. I know we're running out of time, Benny. I want to wrap up with my final question, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude, and you've mentioned so many names here. But if you look around at your peers and contemporaries, however you want to define that, you had years in the NFL. So perhaps teammates or coaches, maybe at the collegiate level, or it could be, mentors in the business world. Who do you respect? Who do you admire? Who are people that you would want to call out and acknowledge?
There's a lot of people that I would love to call out and acknowledge. Not number one, but starting with my dad and the foundation that he laid for myself and my siblings. My mom, the same, and what she did, and who she is as a person, and how much she means to me, and her being my best friend, and then also my brother, my hero. But then my fiance, like, I get a chance to learn from my fiance on a day-to-day basis in terms of she gives me a different lens and a different perspective on what life looks like. And, the fact that we've grown in our relationship, I think, she's somebody that I would like to, respect and admire and, just, give a shout out to. But then I have, friends from Draymond, his respect and him challenging me, Julius Thomas, an incredible mentor, Demarius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Morrell Evans, a really good friend of mine who's in the tech world. There's just so many different people who are very close to me. And then I have to think about, AJ Troop, who's an actor, aspiring actor in Hollywood, Ty Clark, a really good friend of mine who's starting his own company. I've just got so many great people that are doing so many incredible things that I respect.
That's great, Benny. Quiet Time is the podcast. Silver Spoon is the book. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, people can go to LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, and shoot me a message saying Rise 25, heard you on Rise 25, and then we can have a conversation from there. So, I'm open and engaged. I like to connect with everybody, and I'm so glad we got a chance to do this and share this conversation. So, John, I appreciate you having me on.
This is awesome, Benny. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.